Sometimes, the most unsettling moment in life is not when you are lost, but when you finally feel aligned. When the chaos has settled, the noise has reduced, the effort feels lighter. And yet, something still feels unfinished. You're no longer confused, but you're not free either. You know what to do, but you don't know how knowing actually happens. This is the moment most people don't talk about, because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like standing at the edge of clarity without knowing how to step into it. Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Battlefield. I'm Jessica. In this podcast, we explore modern leadership, inner conflict, and personal growth through timeless insights from the Bhagavad Gita. In the last episode, we saw something powerful. Krishna showed us that action finds completion only in knowledge. But tonight, we pause at the very next human question. If sacrifice must be performed in knowledge, then how does a human being actually obtain this knowledge? This episode begins right there. Not with answers, but with readiness. In verse 34 of chapter 4, Krishna says,
Tadvidhi pranipaten pariprashnen sevaya updekshanti te jnanam janinas darshinaha. Learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him with reverence and render service unto him. Such an enlightened saint can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth.
This verse answers a very practical question. Once Krishna says that sacrifice must be performed in knowledge, the next question is obvious. How does a human being actually obtain this knowledge? And Krishna's answer is surprising. He does not begin by defining knowledge. He begins by defining the student, because spiritual knowledge is not transferred, it is received. Pranipata does not mean blind surrender. It means the collapse of one inner sentence, I already know. In modern life, this shows up very clearly as seniority, as expertise, as I've seen this before. Krishna is saying, as long as that voice is alive, knowledge cannot enter. Then comes pariprashna. Not questioning to challenge, but questioning to understand. There is a big difference. One asks to win, the other asks to see. A sincere question sounds like, why do I still feel empty even when things are working? Not like, convince me this is true. Then comes seva, why service is required. This is the most misunderstood part. People ask, why should I serve a teacher? Krishna's answer is psychological, not transactional. Seva is not for the teacher. It is for the student's ego. When you receive without gratitude, you remain a consumer. When you serve, you dissolve selfishness. And without that dissolution, knowledge turns into pride. Now let's understand who can give this knowledge. Krishna uses a very precise phrase, Tattva Darshinha, not scholars, not speakers, but those who have seen. And even they don't give knowledge. They point, they reflect, they allow it to arise in you. That's the law Krishna is stating. Readiness first, teacher later.
All right, I want this to be honest. What didn't work in the last cycle?
This silence mattered. It wasn't resistance. It was people deciding whether truth was still safe. I think we moved too fast.
We had to. The market.
And right there, his body moved faster than his awareness.
Kabir, can I try something?
Sure.
For the next 2 minutes, can you listen without responding?
This was the turning point. Not because Kabir agreed, but because he paused.
Okay.
When feedback came up, it felt like decisions were already made.
I stopped sharing halfway through. It didn't feel useful.
This is what happens when leadership listens late. People don't argue. They quietly withdraw. Kabir wasn't fixing. He wasn't explaining. He was staying.
Can you help me understand where my intent didn't land?
And that question wasn't strategy. It was surrender.
When you answered quickly, it felt like you were done listening.
I see. Go on.
This is what psychological safety sounds like. Not comfort, but permission.
It wasn't hostile, just closed.
Thank you for saying that.
He didn't defend. He didn't justify. He received.
Mira, I wanted to jump in. Correct. Protect.
Most leaders confuse protection with leadership. They don't see. It's often control wearing concern.
I know. That's experience talking.
But it was getting in the way.
Yes. And today, you let it rest.
And when ego rests, learning finally enters. And this is a pranipata moment, the end of inner arrogance. Same day afternoon.
Mona, you mentioned the deck earlier. Want help tightening it?
Now?
Yes, but no rush.
There was no announcement, no authority, no performance.
Also, thank you
For what?
for trusting me with the truth.
This is seva, action without image, help without hierarchy.
I didn't need sharper answers. I needed to stop standing in the way.
And that is how learning actually begins.
And when knowledge enters like this, it doesn't stay theoretical. It changes how you see.
And Krishna tells Arjuna what happens next. In chapter 4, verse 35. Krishna now makes a statement from which there is no return. He says,
यज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोहम एवं यास्यसि पांडव येन भूतान्य शेषेण द्रक्ष्यस्यात्मन्यथो मयि. Knowing this, you will never again fall into delusion. You will see all beings within yourself, and yourself within all beings.
After explaining how knowledge is obtained, Krishna now tells Arjuna what knowledge actually does. He doesn't soften this, he makes a statement that changes everything. This verse is not comforting, it's irreversible. Krishna is not promising peace here, he's promising the end of delusion. He says, knowing this, you will never again fall into moha.
What exactly is moha?
Moha is not lack of information, it's misidentification. It's when fear is mistaken for strategy, ego for confidence, control for leadership, desire for purpose. That confusion is what Krishna calls delusion.
So Krishna isn't saying mistakes stop happening.
No. Mistakes may still happen. Fear may still arise. Desire may still arise. But you will know what is happening. And once you know, you cannot pretend anymore.
That's why Krishna says there is no return.
Exactly. Knowledge here is not memory. It is vision. You cannot unsee what you have seen. Delusion survives only when there is blindness.
Then Krishna goes further. He says this knowledge changes how you see others.
Yes, this is not philosophy. This is psychological clarity. You begin to see the same fear behind aggression, the same insecurity behind dominance, the same hunger behind ambition, not as theory, but as recognition.
And then he says something even more unsettling. You see all of that in yourself.
That's the critical point. Superiority collapses here. But so does victimhood. You can no longer say they are the problem because you see the same mechanisms operating inside you. Blame becomes impossible.
And Krishna completes the picture by saying, and the self in me.
This is often misunderstood. Krishna is not asking Arjuna to worship him. He's pointing to the sameness of consciousness operating everywhere. No absolute enemy, no absolute hero, no isolated self. This verse is not about becoming better. It's about becoming honest. And honesty has a cost. You lose the ability to lie to yourself. And once that happens, there is no going back. That's why verse 35 is a point of no return.
Let me take you into a familiar room. A review meeting, quarter end. Pressure sitting quietly on every chair. The project was late, not a disaster, just enough to require a story. The suggestion came the way it always does.
We can reclassify part of the delay as scope change.
No one reacted, because no one needed to. This was a move everyone understood.
That buys us time.
And Kabir had said these exact words before. Same tone, same calm logic, same relief afterward.
Kabir?
Yes, we can.
And he stopped, mid-sentence. Not because he changed his mind, because the sentence no longer made sense to him.
We can call it scope change. But that's not what it is.
Kabir had said that too, almost word for word. He didn't hear a colleague speaking. He heard a familiar voice.
We're just protecting the team.
He had used that line as well. This is where something subtle happened. Kabir didn't see opponents. He saw his versions. This is what Krishna calls seeing self in others. There was no distance now. No, they are wrong. No, I am right. The blame game has stopped. He is seeing. The same fear, the same need to manage perception. What he was seeing in the room was something he had already lived. This is seeing others in self.
So, what are you saying?
I'm saying we report the delay as it is.
This wasn't to stand against anyone. And it wasn't to stand above anyone. It was a stand inside the same human pattern. Kabir realizes loss of superiority and victimhood.
You've done this before.
I know.
That line matters because it removes the last escape.
No superiority, no innocence, no blame. The meeting ended politely. No relief, no celebration.
You didn't have to make it so visible.
I didn't make it visible. I stopped hiding it.
This is what Krishna means. Not that you become better, but that you stop being divided. When you see yourself in others, and others in yourself, there is no one left to deceive. And once that happens, only one question remains. What about all the times I didn't see this? And Krishna answers that next. Chapter 4, verse 36. Verse 35 removes delusion, but it leaves Arjuna with a heavy question. When you see clearly for the first time, you don't just see the present, you see your past.
Yes, and Krishna doesn't avoid that discomfort. He goes straight to the extreme case. He says,
Api chedasi papebhya sarvebhya papkrittamah sarvam jnanaplavenaiva vrijinam santrishyasi. Even if you are the worst sinner among all sinners, you will cross over all wrongdoing by the raft of knowledge.
This sounds radical, almost dangerous.
it sounds that way only if we misunderstand what Krishna means by sin.
So let's be very clear. When Krishna says sin, what is he pointing to?
Sin here is not a moral label imposed from outside. It is the effect of your action on the agitation of your own mind.
That's an important shift.
If you do something that you yourself consider wrong, whether society agrees or not, it creates agitation inside you. That agitation is the real burden. Sin is not the action alone. It's the residue the action leaves behind. The disturbance, the unrest, the inability to sit peacefully with yourself. And that agitation doesn't behave the same way for every action. It lasts based on how severe you believe the action was. A small infraction, something you barely register, fades quickly. But an action you deeply judge yourself for can stay with you for years, sometimes for a lifetime, and sometimes even beyond that, because the mind keeps replaying what it hasn't resolved.
So the real problem isn't just that we acted unconsciously in the past. It's that we carry that agitation forward. And that agitation quietly shapes future decisions. It becomes a background noise. And from that noise, more unconscious actions are born. And this is where Krishna introduces knowledge as a raft.
Yes, not punishment, not self-attack, not endless regret. Knowledge ends the root of agitation. Because when delusion ends, the mechanism that keeps generating guilt also ends. Krishna is not saying the past didn't happen. He's saying the past no longer has the power to agitate you endlessly. So even the worst past does not trap you forever. Not because it's excused, but because it's understood. And once understood, it stops poisoning the present.
So verse 35 took away self-deception, and verse 36 takes away self-condemnation. First, Krishna removes blindness, then he removes despair. Let me take you back 1 year. Not to a dramatic moment, but to a quiet one. Kabir was still at his desk. The office was mostly empty. The kind of night where decisions feel heavier than usual. There was an email on his screen. Short, professional, carefully worded. It didn't accuse anyone. It didn't lie, but it redirected responsibility. He hesitated, then clicked send. At the time, it felt necessary. Not cruel. Just efficient. Nothing dramatic happened the next day. No confrontation. No outrage. But weeks later, a colleague stopped being included. Invites slowed. Opportunities shifted. Kabir noticed and told himself, that's how things move sometimes. But the email didn't leave. It came back at odd hours, while rereading messages, while rewriting drafts, while explaining decisions that didn't need explaining. The action was over, but something inside hadn't settled. He didn't call it guilt. He just felt restless. Months later, a similar situation came up. Another decision. Another name that could be moved aside. This time, Kabir hesitated too long. Asked for more data. Delayed clarity.
We need a call, Kabir.
He nodded. But something held him back. The old email was still working. Not as memory, but as pressure. Later that evening, Meera noticed.
You're carrying something.
Kabir didn't answer immediately.
You're not fixing anything. You're punishing yourself.
No accusation, no advice. Just a sentence that landed. For the first time, Kabir saw it clearly. The agitation wasn't protecting anyone. It wasn't repairing the past. It was only traveling forward. The email was done, but the disturbance was being rewritten every day. The next morning, Kabir wrote another email. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a defense. It was simple. He acknowledged the impact. He didn't justify. He didn't dramatize. And then, he didn't reread it. Nothing outside changed immediately. The past stayed where it was. But something heavy stopped moving forward. The restlessness eased. Not because he was forgiven, but because he stopped feeding the disturbance. This is what Krishna means. Even the heaviest past does not drown you forever. Knowledge doesn't erase the river. It gives you a way across. And once the crossing happens, something else becomes possible. Not just release, but transformation.
यथैधांसि समिद्धोग निर्भस्मसात् कुरुते रजुन ज्ञानाग्नि सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा just as a blazing fire turns firewood into ashes, O Arjuna, the fire of knowledge turns all actions and their binding effects into ashes.
This sounds intense, Ankur. What exactly is Krishna claiming?
He's claiming transformation at the root. Verse 36 addressed the weight of the past as agitation. Verse 37 addresses the fuel that keeps producing that weight. Krishna is not saying you will never act again. He's saying your actions will stop binding you.
Why firewood? Why not just fire burns?
Because wood represents stored potential. It's compact, waiting, and once it catches, it becomes irreversible. That's how karmic tendencies work inside us. Years of habits, fears, desires, and identities sit like dry fuel. A small trigger comes, and the whole personality ignites. Krishna is saying knowledge doesn't fight the flames. Knowledge burns the fuel.
And this knowledge isn't information.
Not even close. It's the seeing we built in verse 35. End of misidentification. Fear stops pretending to be strategy. Ego stops pretending to be leadership. Convenience stops pretending to be clarity. That seeing produces heat, and that heat is what Krishna calls Gyan Agni, the fire of knowledge.
He says, all karma. That's a big statement. What exactly gets burned?
Because karma here is not just the visible action. It includes the binding residue, the I am the doer pride, the guilt, the anxiety, the future bargaining, the self-condemnation. In other words, the part of action that keeps you psychologically chained. Knowledge burns that.
So is Krishna saying the past is erased?
No, the event stays in history, but the inner poison can be burned. Think of what we just discussed. Sin as agitation. The action is over. The agitation survives. Verse 37 says the agitation is burnable. Not by suppressing it, not by punishing yourself, but by seeing through the doer that keeps feeding it.
Krishna doesn't say fire removes. He says ashes. Why?
Because ashes can't become wood again. Ash has no capacity to ignite the same way. That's the irreversibility again. When knowledge burns a pattern, you may remember it, but it no longer has the same power. It doesn't pull you with the same force. It doesn't control your next decision.
Some listeners could misunderstand this and think, then I can do anything. Knowledge will burn it.
That misunderstanding comes from thinking knowledge is a tool you use while remaining the same person. Krishna is describing knowledge that changes the person who would want to do harm. Fire of knowledge doesn't protect wrongdoing. It destroys the identity that repeats wrongdoing. That's why the metaphor is fire, not forgiveness.
Bring this to a modern leader. What does Gyanagni look like on a Monday morning?
It looks like this. The same trigger happens, but the old reaction doesn't arise with the same authority. Someone challenges you publicly. Earlier, you needed to dominate. Now you see insecurity and you don't have to protect the image. A mistake happens. Earlier, you needed a scapegoat. Now you see fear and you can name facts without blame. A big outcome is at stake. Earlier, you reframed reality. Now you can't blur it because clarity has become your nature. That is karma turning to ash. The compulsive pattern loses its fuel.
So the deepest thing getting burned is the doer?
Yes, the doer as ego. I must control. I must win. I must be seen. I must be safe. As long as that doer is alive, every action produces residue. Pride if it succeeds, guilt if it fails. Knowledge burns that doer. Then action becomes clean.
This is what Krishna means. When knowledge becomes fire, it doesn't change the world. It changes what inside you can still ignite. Verse 35 ended delusion. Verse 36 released the past. And verse 37 burned the fuel. This is where action becomes clean. And this is where Krishna now turns Arjuna toward how such knowledge is lived. Beyond the Battlefield.
Today's journey was not about becoming better. It was about becoming clear.
Krishna didn't promise Arjuna comfort. He promised him something far more demanding: honesty. In verse 34, we saw that knowledge doesn't arrive through intelligence alone. It arrives when humility replaces ego, when questions replaces certainty, and when service dissolves selfishness. In verse 35, we saw what happens when that knowledge truly lands. Delusion doesn't fight back. It simply stops working. In verse 36, Krishna addressed the heaviest fear of all: the past. And he reminded us that sin is not a label. It is the agitation we carry forward. And that agitation can be crossed. And finally, in verse 37, we saw fire. Not fire that destroys the world, but fire that burns the fuel inside us. So the same old triggers can no longer ignite the same old reactions. If today's episode stirred something in you, sit with it. Don't rush to fix it. Clarity doesn't ask for action immediately. It asks for honesty first. And if this episode helped you see something more clearly, please share it with someone who might be carrying a similar weight. Subscribe to Beyond the Battlefield so you don't miss the next step in this journey. And if you'd like to write to us, tell us what resonated, what challenged you, or what stayed with you. You can reach us at beyondthebattlefield@outlook.in. And don't forget to check the GPT companion link in the description for deeper reflections and guided explorations. Until next time, remember, the real battlefield was never outside. It was always within.